I would like to introduce my good friend Amir Farouk from the African Union AI Working Group. We want to talk about the African Union AI strategy. Amir Safwat is some people call him Amir. He says Amir. You'll have to tell us how you pronounce your good name. He's the manager of African Organization Affairs at Egypt's Ministry of Communications and Information Technology. With over 18 years of experience, he specializes in managing partnerships with international and regional stakeholders, particularly in Africa. He has a strong background in ICT for development and has worked on different programs. He represents Egypt within the African Union and Africa Telecommunications Union bodies. He's chaired key committees, including the African Union Working Group on Artificial Intelligence. He holds 2 master's degrees, one in public administration from Singapore, the Lee Kuan Yew University, and another in Euro-Mediterranean Studies from Cairo University. Karibu Sana, Amir. Let's start off with what the African Union strategy talks about. And I want to ask Amir, what's this about? How is the strategy working through for the African Union, and where are we at with the strategy?
Well, if you talk about the African strategy on AI, if I can take you back in history, but not too long, maybe 5-6 years ago, before the year of 2019, there was only very few countries, or maybe at that time, 2019, I don't think that there was any country at that time in Africa that has an exclusive strategy or a policy on AI. So what we realized at that time, that the African voices, the African common stance was missing. It was absent at that time. And artificial intelligence, as you all know, it's by nature, it's a cross-border technology, or actually it's now an ecosystem. So it's by nature, you will be affected and impacted by it. So if you're not, as Africans, are on the forefront of the global dialogue on AI, we'll be heavily and negatively impacted by it. So at that time in Egypt, like we thought, why don't we combine and gear all the voices of Africa in one common stance on AI. So during that time in 2019, we were hosting the 3rd STC, which is the Specialized Technical Committee of the AU. This is the annual meeting of Honorable Ministers of ICT of the African Union member states. It was held in the city of Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt. So we made the proposal. Egypt made the proposal at that time, and it was honored and accepted and endorsed by Honorable Ministers of ICT in Africa. So we established this group at that time. 6 member states, of course, including Egypt as well, expressed interest to start working on that. We hosted the first 3 meetings in Egypt, in Cairo, in Egypt. We started working about having an AI common stance. And then by time, as our talks and negotiations evolved, we thought, why don't we have a common strategy on AI? Because the main strategy of AI in Africa will address a number of very important topics. First of all, we want to have an inclusive AI system. We want to be inclusive for everyone. We don't want to leave anyone behind. As you all know, there are multiple of risks of AI. One of them, which is very important, very dangerous to our African continent, is the increase in the technological gap between the different areas of the world. Secondly, biasness. Most of, or actually all of the data now that AI systems are using in the entire world, they're coming from the West. And most of them are not representing the real culture and the real demographics of Africa. So this is a very important and very dangerous aspect as well. Thirdly, as you all know, transparency and explainability. If you're heavily and entirely using AI systems, then it's our right as human beings, before being citizens, to know what is this system telling us. So that's why we thought of having a very inclusive AI system. We also wanted to be more African-centric. It was very easy at that time when we were developing the strategy just to copy paste from most of regions of the world, because if you go to most of the AI strategies of the regions in the world, you'll find them a lot similar in most of them. But what we wanted is a more African-centric AI strategy. We wanted to address the unique challenges of Africa. We wanted also to address the unique aspirations of Africa. We thought of having an AI strategy to help us expedite achieving the Agenda 2063. For all of you who are not aware of this terminology, this is the strategic development agenda of the AU, which is Agenda 2063. So we wanted to use AI for this. We also wanted AI to focus on critical sectors in the economy. Especially, we chose five critical sectors in Africa. Like you can implement AI and apply it in all sectors, but if we do so, we will not go anywhere. We have to be more focused. So we thought of talking about agriculture, AI agriculture, because agriculture contributes to more than 60% of employment in Africa. We also talk about healthcare. Africa is the most continent in the world that is affected by health problems. We also talked about public services. Especially in Africa and especially in Egypt, we have big populations, and I'm representing the government, but of course I'm not shy or embarrassed to say so, that unfortunately in the past, most of our public service delivery agents were accused of corruption, of nepotism. So it was like a nightmare for everyone to go and finish and deliver on their public services. So that's why public services as well is one of the main critical sectors. Peace and security. So we also wanted to use AI to prevail peace and security in Africa. Yeah, so those were like the main in a nutshell, but I'll just stop here and I'll be more than happy, of course, to further elaborate and to answer further questions.
Thank you so much, Amir. And I like your owning of the strategy. We've been part of these conversations with you at the African Union AI Working Group. And it's really interesting to see the evolution of the strategy and how it's been adopted by member states. I think that there's been no reservations around the strategy compared to, let's say, the digital trade protocol that had reservations. And I think that's important to look at the goodwill that many countries do have on this. If you didn't read the strategy, so this is it. The Continental strategy began as an initiative, and Amir has talked about the 2019 third ordinary session of the STC in Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt, where they were requested to establish a working group on AI. And this was supposed to create a common African stance on AI so that countries weren't really at loggerheads on what they needed to do, and also look at a think tank and develop capacity building within the group. In November 2023, there was an approval from the 5th STC in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, and this was the approval of the conceptual framework on AI. So the conceptual framework on AI is different from the strategy, if you understand. Then it was endorsed at the 44th ordinary session of the AU Executive Council, so endorsed this framework, and then they were tasked to develop a comprehensive continental AI strategy. In April 2024, some of us attended the consultations. There were virtual multi-stakeholder consultations on AI. And so this strategy was refined with input from different people, from AUDA, NEPAD, AUC departments, regional economic blocs, and also UN agencies, including UNESCO and UNECA. And so that is the backdrop of what this roadmap looks like. On the next slide, we talk about what are the structure of the AI strategy. We have guiding principles, and it's good to compare these guiding principles to what OECD has talked about in terms of their principles, as well as UNESCO principles. So we're looking at ethics, inclusion and diversity, human rights and human dignity, people's well-being, and peace and prosperity. So if you look at this, the opportunity is, how do we harness AI and its benefit as Africa? Not just what works for other people, but what works for us. Then how do we build AI capabilities in terms of people, machines, and all? And then how do we minimize the risks? We know the risks of AI within the African continent. There's misinformation around elections. There's peace and security that needs to be maintained. We also have, what do they call them? The content moderators who've been complaining of abuse within the African continent. And then also the startups. How do we stimulate investment and foster cooperation? On the next slide, we talk about the 15 action areas, and Amir highlighted this, the 15 action areas on governance and regulation. So we need to establish AI governance systems on infrastructure and ecosystem to ensure that there's availability of high quality and diverse data sets, as well as to build AI infrastructure. So all the things we're talking about that me highlighted on this call, as well as Jill, on high performance computing, data centers, and cloud services. On the next slide, we talk about what are the adoption and implementation. So we need to promote AI adoption in the public sector. And if you compare this with what the United States did, President Biden had an executive order on what needs to be done in terms of AI adoption within the public sector, making sure that you reskill those in the public sector so that they know how to use AI. We need to accelerate AI adoption in the core sectors aligned with Agenda 2063. That is the core document guiding the African Union. And then also to look at how private sector and SMEs can ideally work with AI. How do we boost investment? What are the enabling laws that ensure that people can ideally, invest in AI? And then finally, on education and skills, how do you provide reskilling programs for jobs impacted by AI so that people are not just left out of jobs, but there are new jobs that they could talk about? And then also looking at how to build AI infrastructure. We've seen that there are specific countries like China that have really built infrastructure in the continent. How does it mean for us to then build these things? And then the other things are on ethics and human rights to protect children, especially as been mentioned on this. And also Amir mentioned diversity and inclusivity, that we need inclusive AI. In this particular sense. On media and information integrity, we're looking at literacy and information integrity. Information integrity covers misinformation and disinformation, and cooperation and partnerships. What is Africa's place globally? So Europe has a stance on AI by having an AI Act. But what is Africa doing in terms of regional cooperation? So it will enhance regional cooperation among stakeholders and also increase Africa's participation in global AI governance, because the voice has been missing. Africa, only one African country, Egypt, is part of the OECD principles on AI. So that means that we need to have more participation. From our study at the Policy Lab, we see that the United States co-sponsored the AI resolution at the UN with Kenya. And we have many other countries that came up and adopted this AI resolution at the UN in March this year. So we need to increase that number in terms of participation. In terms of research and innovation, we're promoting AI skills and talent development in education and the workforce. So this is very interesting on what each and every person can do. And I want to ask everyone on the room, what is it that you can do in this sense? The African Union is going to develop a 5-year implementation plan for the Continental AI strategy. They will conduct research, they will engage multi-stakeholder policy discussion. They will also integrate AI into the development agenda, that's Agenda 2063. They're also going to host an annual conference on AI safety and security, and also to develop innovative financing mechanisms. And that I think is looking at infrastructure as well as how to do this for startups. And then also they're going to have inventory AI-focused centers of excellence. We already have an AI center of excellence in Congo, Brazzaville, I think funded by UNECA, and there's another one in Rwanda. And so we are going to see a lot of AI centers of excellence coming up within the African continent. For those in the private sector, they need to collaborate with innovators and invest in AI solutions, then also support efforts to build data sets, computing capabilities, and AI skills. For development partners like NGOs, and we're seeing this with also continental organizations like the UN, they're going to accelerate AI to address Africa's development challenges. And we're seeing in the study that lawyers have did from the Policy Lab, we're seeing that the topmost AI startups within the African continent are in 3 areas. They're in health, they're in agriculture, they're in education. Like that's where people are innovating around AI. And then also finally, the development partners will support AU member states in building essential data sets. And so what is your country going to be doing under the strategy? So your country will develop regulatory frameworks. So we're going to see more of AI laws coming up. We're going to see national AI strategy. From our study at the Policy Lab, there's about only 9 African countries now with national AI strategies. Some of them are still working on it. We have countries that were at the forefront, from Egypt to Benin, that have already come up with AI strategies. There are some that are in the process, like Nigeria has a public call, and South Africa, and we also know Kenya is continuing to have the conversation. So how do we get there? They're going to focus on talent development, resource mobilization, and startup promotion.